In a galaxy ruled by ancient power struggles, two empires have fought for centuries, while the rest of the universe watched. The Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective, locked in a never-ending war, were about to be forced into peace talks. But when the newest species in the galaxy, humanity, was asked to mediate, the leaders of both sides saw only weakness. They were wrong. Commander Sarah Chun, Dr. Marcus Webb, and their human delegation arrived with hope for peace, but what they uncovered was something far darker. A war designed not to end, but to perpetuate the control of two civilizations, one built on lies, one on blood. And when the truth was exposed, humanity made a choice that would shake the very foundation of the galaxy. Faced with the chance to join a system that murdered billions for power, humanity chose something the galaxy had never seen before: integrity. And in that moment, the galaxy held its breath as humanity turned its back on their civilized ways and walked away from the talks that could have changed everything. But they didn't walk away out of fear. They walked away to show the galaxy what true strength was. The unexpected Mediators, the stellar convergence station, hung in the void like a massive crystal flower, its transparent walls reflecting the light of three nearby stars. Built at the exact center of known space, it served as neutral ground where the galaxy's most powerful civilizations could meet without fear of attack. Today, representatives from over 200 worlds had gathered for what many hoped would be the most important peace talks in galactic history. Commander Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck, watching alien ships arrive in streams of light. Her reflection in the reinforced glass showed a woman in her early 40s with short black hair and determined brown eyes. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, looking modest compared to the elaborate ceremonial robes and technological suits of the arriving aliens. "Still can't believe they chose us," said Dr. Marcus Webb, joining her at the window. The tall, bearded man carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades studying alien psychology. His specialty was conflict resolution, and he had helped negotiate dozens of smaller disputes between human colonies and alien trading partners. 300 years of war, Sarah replied, watching a massive Vorthan battleship dock with mechanical precision. The Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective have been trying to destroy each other since before humans even left Earth. Every attempt at mediation has failed. The conflict between these two ancient civilizations had shaped galactic politics for centuries. The Vorthan Empire controlled the dense star clusters of the inner galaxy, where resources were abundant but space was limited. They were a militaristic society that valued order, hierarchy, and expansion. The Meridian Collective dominated the outer rim, where vast distances between stars created a culture based on independence, innovation, and technological advancement. What had started as a border dispute over mining rights had escalated into total war. Entire star systems had been sterilized. Billions of beings had died. The conflict had drawn in dozens of other species, creating a web of alliances and enemies that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. The Galactic Council tried sending the Altarians first, Marcus continued, referring to the ancient race that had dominated galactic politics for millennia, too old-fashioned. Then the Centauri Confederation, too focused on profit. The Ethereal Collective wouldn't even take sides. Sarah nodded, remembering the emergency session where the Council had debated who could possibly mediate between two civilizations that had refused all previous attempts at peace. Humanity had been suggested almost as a joke. They were the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel, controlling only a small region of space on the galaxy's edge. Most older civilizations barely acknowledged their existence, but humans had one advantage that surprised everyone. In the 50 years since joining the galactic community, they had developed a reputation for creative problem-solving. While other species relied on tradition, protocol, and established procedures, humans approached problems from unexpected angles. They had settled disputes that others considered impossible, found solutions that no one else had thought of, and somehow made enemies into friends. The Council is desperate, Sarah said. They know that if this war continues, it will eventually consume the entire galaxy. They're willing to try anything, even trusting humans. A soft chime indicated that the main assembly was beginning. Sarah and Marcus made their way through corridors filled with delegates from across the galaxy. The architecture of the station was deliberately neutral, with smooth curves and soft lighting that didn't favor any particular species' preferences. Translation devices hummed quietly, converting hundreds of languages into comprehensible communication. The main assembly hall was a marvel of engineering. It could accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. Atmospheric shields created pockets of breathable air for species that required different gas mixtures. Gravity generators allowed floating species to hover comfortably while ground dwellers walked on solid floors. The temperature varied in zones to keep everyone comfortable. That the center of the hall stood a circular platform where the actual negotiations would take place. Rising around it in concentric circles were observation seats for the hundreds of delegates, journalists, and observers who had come to witness what many believed would be either the greatest diplomatic triumph or the most spectacular failure in galactic history. Sarah and Marcus took their positions at the negotiation platform. Across from them, two very different figures prepared to represent their civilizations. Ambassador Krell of the Vorthan Empire was exactly what Sarah had expected from studying his species. 7 feet tall, with gray skin and 4 arms, he wore the black and silver uniform of the Vorthan military. His people had evolved from pack hunters, and their society reflected their predatory origins. Krell's red eyes showed intelligence and calculation, constantly evaluating threats and opportunities. High Chancellor ZYX of Meridian Collective was Krell's opposite in almost every way. Her species had evolved from deep-sea creatures, and she wore a specialized suit that maintained the high-pressure, low-light environment her people preferred. Through the transparent aluminum of her helmet, her large eyes showed the quick intelligence of a species that had learned to survive in the vast emptiness of space. The Meridian Collective valued individual achievement and technological innovation above all else. "We gather today," announced the station's AI moderator, its voice translated into every language simultaneously to attempt once again to find peace between the Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective. "The human delegation has agreed to serve as mediators." A ripple of skeptical murmurs ran through the assembly. Sarah could hear fragments of conversation in dozens of languages, most expressing doubt about humanity's ability to succeed where others had failed. Ambassador Krell spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of military command. "The Vorthan Empire has agreed to these talks only because the Galactic Council insisted. We have little hope that these young humans can understand the complexities of our ancient conflict." High Chancellor ZYX's response came through her suit's communication system, her words precise and measured. "The Meridian Collective shares this skepticism. Humans have been part of the galactic community for mere decades. They lack the experience to mediate between civilizations that have existed for millennia." Sarah felt the weight of expectation and doubt pressing down on her. Every eye in the hall was watching, waiting to see if humanity would prove worthy of the trust placed in them or if they would fail as spectacularly as their critics expected. She stood slowly, her voice calm and confident. "You're right. We are young. We don't have thousands of years of experience or ancient traditions to guide us. But sometimes a fresh perspective can see solutions that experience has overlooked." Marcus activated the holographic display system, showing a detailed map of the disputed territories. "Before we discuss terms or conditions, we'd like to understand the true scope of this conflict. What started as a mining dispute has become something much larger. Help us understand how we got here." For the next several hours, both sides presented their cases. The Vorthans emphasized their right to expand into territories that could support their growing population. The Meridian Collective argued for their need to maintain the trade routes that were essential to their economy. Each side had legitimate concerns, but 3 centuries of hatred had made compromise seem impossible. Sarah listened carefully, taking notes, and asking questions that sometimes surprised the alien delegates. She didn't focus on the traditional diplomatic points that previous mediators had emphasized. Instead, she asked about the people affected by the war, the costs of continued conflict, and the benefits that peace might bring to ordinary citizens. What do your people actually want? She asked Ambassador Krell during a break in the formal presentations. Not your government or your military leaders. The farmers, the workers, the families who have been fighting this war for generations. Krell's red eyes showed surprise at the question. They want victory, of course. They want the security and prosperity that comes from defeating our enemies. But what if there was another way to achieve security and prosperity? Marcus asked High Chancellor ZYX, what if cooperation could provide more benefits than conquest? ZYX's large eyes blinked slowly in her helmet. An interesting theoretical question. But the Meridian Collective has learned through bitter experience that the Vorthans cannot be trusted. They have broken every previous agreement. And the Meridian Collective has violated every treaty we've signed, Krell replied sharply. They promise cooperation but continue their aggressive expansion into our territory. Sarah felt a familiar frustration. This was exactly the kind of circular argument that had trapped previous mediators. Each side had legitimate grievances, but they were so focused on past wrongs that they couldn't see future possibilities. What if we tried something different? She suggested. Instead of focusing on what went wrong in the past, what if we talked about what both sides need for the future? The suggestion was so simple, it was almost insulting. Ambassador Krell's forearms tensed with irritation. Humans clearly do not understand the complexity of our situation. We are not children who can be distracted from serious issues with simple questions. High Chancellor ZYX's response was more diplomatic, but equally dismissive. The Meridian Collective appreciates human enthusiasm, but some problems cannot be solved with optimism and good intentions. Sarah felt a flush of anger at their condescending tone, but she kept her voice steady. You're right. We don't understand the complexity of your situation, but maybe that's exactly what you need. Maybe you've been looking at this problem for so long that you can't see the forest for the trees. As the first day of negotiations ended, Sarah and Marcus returned to their quarters feeling frustrated but not defeated. They had expected skepticism from the alien delegates, but they had also sensed something unexpected. Despite their dismissive words, both Krell and ZYX had shown moments of genuine interest in the human approach. They're testing us, Marcus observed as they reviewed their notes. They want to see if we'll back down when they dismiss our ideas. Then we'll have to prove that human stubbornness can be more powerful than alien arrogance, Sarah replied. Outside their window, the stars wheeled slowly as the station rotated to provide artificial gravity. Somewhere out there, two vast civilizations continued their ancient war, unaware that their fate might depend on the determination of two humans who refused to accept that some problems were too complex to solve. The real test would come tomorrow, when Sarah and Marcus would present their preliminary assessment to the full assembly. They had a plan, but it would require both sides to take risks that neither had been willing to consider before. The question was whether humanity's reputation for creative problem-solving would be enough to overcome 3 centuries of hatred and mistrust. The shocking discovery the second day of negotiations began with an unexpected development. During the night, Sarah had received a coded message from an anonymous source within the station. The message contained a single data file and a brief note, the truth about the war. Look carefully. Sarah and Marcus had spent hours analyzing the file in the security of their quarters. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about the conflict between the Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective. The file contained communication logs, financial records, and military reports spanning the past 50 years. At first glance, they appeared to be routine wartime documents. But as Sarah and Marcus studied them more carefully, patterns emerged that made their blood run cold. This can't be right, Marcus whispered, staring at a financial record that showed weapons sales to both sides by the same arms dealer. These records show that the Vorthans and Meridians have been buying weapons from each other's suppliers. Sarah pulled up another document, a communication log between military commanders on opposite sides of the conflict. The message was brief but shocking. Operation Crimson Dawn proceeding as scheduled. Civilian casualties maintained at acceptable levels. Media coverage confirms public support for continued conflict. More evidence followed. Battle plans that seemed designed to maximize destruction while minimizing strategic gain. Trade agreements that continued even during the fiercest fighting. Financial transactions that showed money flowing between supposedly enemy governments. They're not really fighting, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're performing. This whole war is an elaborate show. The implications were staggering. For 3 centuries, billions of beings had died in a conflict that was carefully orchestrated by the leaders of both civilizations. The war wasn't about territory or resources or ancient grudges. It was about control. Marcus found the key document buried deep in the files. It was a formal agreement between the Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective, signed over 200 years ago. The document was written in an ancient diplomatic language that few modern beings could read, but the translation was clear enough. The Perpetual Conflict Protocol, Marcus read aloud, a framework for maintaining population control, resource allocation, and political stability through managed warfare. The protocol outlined a system of careful warfare designed to serve multiple purposes. It controlled population growth by ensuring a steady stream of military casualties. It maintained political unity by giving each civilization an external enemy to hate. It justified massive military spending that enriched the ruling classes. Most importantly, it prevented the kind of technological and social progress that might threaten the established order. Sarah felt sick as she read the details. The war wasn't random or chaotic. It was planned down to the smallest detail. Battles were scheduled to ensure maximum media coverage. Casualties were calculated to maintain public support without damaging either civilization's long-term strength. Even the peace talks were part of the system, designed to fail in ways that would justify continued conflict. "We have to expose this," Marcus said, his voice shaking with anger. "Billions of people have died for a lie." "We have to be careful," Sarah replied. "If this information is accurate, then both Krell and ZYX know about it. They're not really enemies. They're co-conspirators." The morning session of negotiations took on a surreal quality. Sarah and Marcus sat across from Ambassador Krell and High Chancellor ZYX, knowing that everything they were hearing was an elaborate performance. The alien delegates continued their carefully rehearsed arguments, each side making demands that they knew the other would reject. Sarah found herself studying the 2 aliens with new eyes. Krell's aggressive posturing and ZYX's cold calculation weren't the products of genuine hatred. They were playing roles like actors in a play that had been running for centuries. "The Vorthan Empire cannot accept any solution that doesn't guarantee our access to the Kepler mining sector," Krell declared, his forearms gesturing dramatically. "These resources are essential for our people's survival, and the Meridian Collective will never allow Vorthan expansion into our sovereign territory," ZYX replied, her voice carrying just the right note of righteous indignation. "Such aggression cannot be rewarded with territorial concessions." Sarah felt her patience snap. "Stop," she said quietly, but her voice carried enough authority to interrupt both aliens. "Just stop." The assembly hall fell silent. Hundreds of delegates turned to look at the human mediator who had dared to interrupt formal negotiations. "I have a question," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "How long have you 2 been working together?" The reaction was immediate and telling. Ambassador Krell's red eyes widened in what might have been surprise or fear. High Chancellor ZYX's breathing apparatus made a sharp hissing sound. Around the hall, other delegates began murmuring in confusion. "I don't understand the question," Krell said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "I think you do," Sarah replied. She activated the holographic display system, showing the first piece of evidence they had discovered. "This is a communication log between Vorthan General Fax and Meridian Fleet Commander Yex. They're discussing casualty targets for the Battle of Proxima 7. The hall erupted in shocked gasps and angry shouts. Delegates from dozens of species rose from their seats, demanding explanations. The station's AI moderators struggled to maintain order as the revelation spread through the assembly. "This is clearly fabricated," ZYX said, but her voice sounded hollow through her helmet speakers. The Meridian Collective would never engage in such deception. "Really?" Marcus said, displaying another document. "Then how do you explain these financial records showing weapons purchases from the same suppliers? Or these trade agreements that continued even during your most intense battles?" More evidence flashed across the screens. The Perpetual Conflict Protocol appeared in dozens of languages, its provisions clear and undeniable. The carefully planned battles, the manufactured crises, the deliberate perpetuation of hatred between two civilizations that had been secretly cooperating for centuries. Ambassador Krell stood slowly, his military bearing intact despite the chaos around him. These documents prove nothing. Even if they are genuine, they could be misinterpreted by those who don't understand the complexities of galactic politics. Complexities? Sarah's voice rose with anger. "You call the murder of billions of innocent beings a complexity? You call the systematic deception of entire civilizations a political strategy? You are young," Krell replied, his voice cold and patronizing. "You see the galaxy in simple terms of right and wrong. But those who bear the responsibility of leadership must sometimes make difficult choices." High Chancellor ZYX moved to stand beside Krell, a gesture that would have been impossible if they were truly enemies. "The Meridian Collective concurs with our Vorthan colleague. The maintenance of galactic stability requires sacrifices that younger species cannot comprehend." Sarah felt the full weight of what they were saying. It wasn't just that the war was fake. It was that the leaders of both civilizations believed it was justified. They had convinced themselves that their elaborate lie was necessary for the greater good. "Galactic stability?" Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. "You've been slaughtering your own people for centuries to maintain your power. You've turned war into a business and death into a commodity." "We have prevented chaos," ZYX replied calmly. "Without controlled conflict, populations grow beyond sustainable levels. Without external enemies, civilizations turn inward and destroy themselves through civil war. Without the discipline of warfare, technological development stagnates." "You're talking about genocide," Sarah said. "You're talking about the systematic murder of billions of beings to serve your political agenda." "We are talking about survival," Krell said. "The survival of galactic civilization itself. The young human species cannot understand because you have never faced the responsibility of maintaining order across thousands of worlds." Sarah looked around the assembly hall. The delegates from other species were listening with a mixture of horror and fascination. Some looked shocked by the revelations. Others seemed to be considering the aliens' justifications. A few appeared to already know the truth. "How many of you knew?" Sarah asked the assembly. "How many of you were part of this conspiracy?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Not everyone knew, but enough had known to keep the secret. The war between the Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective wasn't just their conspiracy. It was supported by a network of civilizations that benefited from the controlled conflict. "The human delegation has learned something important today," announced a new voice. An elderly Altarian delegate rose from his seat, his ancient face grave with sorrow. "They have learned that the galaxy is not the idealistic place they imagined. We are not a community of equals working toward common goals. We are a collection of predators and prey, rulers and ruled. This is how galactic civilization has always worked," added a representative from the Centauri Confederation. "The strong control the weak. The wise guide the foolish. The experienced teach the young." These humans expected to find a galaxy of heroes and discovered a galaxy of survivors. Sarah felt a cold understanding settle over her. This wasn't just about the war between two civilizations. This was about the fundamental nature of galactic society. The older species had created a system where conflict was managed, populations were controlled, and change was prevented. They had built a galaxy-wide system of oppression and called it stability. You're offering us a choice, Sarah said to Krell and ZYX. Join your system or be crushed by it. We are offering you wisdom, Krell replied. The human species has shown remarkable potential. You could become valuable partners in maintaining galactic order. Think carefully, ZYX added. You have seen the truth behind the illusion. You can either accept your place in the system or be destroyed by forces beyond your comprehension. Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They had come to mediate a peace between two enemies and discovered that the enemies were actually allies. They had expected to find heroes and found conspirators. They had hoped to save lives and learned that death was the foundation of galactic civilization. The choice was clear, but it wasn't the choice they had expected to make. They could accept the system and become part of the conspiracy, or they could reject it and face the consequences. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. The session ended in chaos and confusion. Sarah and Marcus knew that they had to contact Earth immediately. The decision they made in the next few hours would determine not just their own fate, but the future of humanity itself. Humanity's defiant stand-to emergency communication with Earth took place in the dead of night, station time. Sarah and Marcus sat in the secure communication room, waiting for the quantum entanglement link to establish connection across the vast distance to humanity's homeworld. The weight of what they had discovered pressed down on them like a physical force. President Elena Vasquez appeared on the screen first, her gray hair pulled back severely, and her dark eyes showing the strain of being awakened for an emergency session. Around her, the crisis team assembled. General Patricia Hayes, head of Earth's Defense Forces, Director James Park from the Intelligence Service, and Dr. Rachel Morrison from the Department of Xenological Affairs. Report, President Vasquez said simply, Sarah spent 20 minutes explaining everything they had discovered. The fake war, the perpetual conflict protocol, the galaxy-wide conspiracy to maintain control through managed violence. When she finished, the silence from Earth stretched for long moments. You're certain about this evidence? Director Park asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. We verified it through multiple sources, Marcus replied. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. The war is real in terms of casualties, but it's completely artificial in terms of purpose. General Hayes leaned forward, her weathered face grim. What's the military situation if we refuse to cooperate? They haven't been specific about threats, Sarah said, but the implications are clear. Every major galactic power appears to be part of this system. If we expose it or refuse to join it, we'll be facing the entire galaxy. President Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant as she considered the implications. How many people know about this on our end? Just us, and now you, Marcus replied. But the aliens suspect we know. They're waiting for our response. Dr. Morrison spoke up from the back of the room. The philosophical implications are staggering. We're not just talking about political corruption or military conspiracy. We're talking about the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Everything we believed about joining the galactic community was based on a lie. The question, President Vasquez said, is what we do with this information. We have three options. We can expose the conspiracy and face the consequences. We can join the system and become part of the problem. Or we can stay silent and pretend ignorance. Staying silent makes us complicit, Sarah said firmly. Once we know the truth, we can't unknow it. Every day we keep this secret is another day that billions of beings die for a lie. But exposing it could mean the end of human civilization, General Hayes pointed out. Our entire fleet couldn't stand against the combined might of the galaxy. We'd be fighting a war we absolutely cannot win. Director Park pulled up strategic assessments on his tablet. Our colonies are vulnerable. We depend on alien technology for life support systems on dozens of worlds. If they unite against us, they could literally turn off the air. Then we make ourselves independent, President Vasquez said quietly. We've been too dependent on alien technology. Anyway, this crisis might force us to develop our own capabilities. That could take decades, Dr. Morrison warned. And that's assuming we survive the initial response to our defiance. The debate continued for hours, with Earth's leaders weighing the impossible choice between survival and principles. Sarah and Marcus watched from the space station, knowing that whatever decision was made would echo through history. Finally, President Vasquez called for a vote. The result was unanimous, though Sarah could see the pain in every face on the screen. They had chosen the hard path, the dangerous path, the path that might lead to humanity's extinction. Humanity will not be part of this system, President Vasquez announced. We will expose the conspiracy and accept whatever consequences follow. We'd rather die as free beings than live as slaves to a system built on murder. The communication ended, leaving Sarah and Marcus alone in the secure room. They had their orders, but they also had a choice about how to carry them out. They could simply announce the truth and let chaos follow, or they could make a statement that would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The full assembly is meeting in 2 hours, Marcus said, checking the station schedule. Every delegate will be there. Every news service in the galaxy will be watching. Then that's where we make our stand, Sarah replied. They spent the remaining time preparing their presentation. Not just the evidence of the conspiracy, but a statement of human values that would explain why they couldn't be part of the system. They knew it might be the last speech humanity ever made to the galaxy. The assembly hall was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread that something extraordinary was about to happen. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled every seat, while news crews from across the galaxy focused their cameras on the small human delegation. Ambassador Krell and High Chancellor ZYX sat at the negotiation platform, their body language showing confidence despite the previous day's revelations. They believed they had offered humanity a reasonable choice, and they expected the humans to make the rational decision. Sarah stood at the central podium, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. Every eye in the hall was focused on her, waiting to see what the newest species in the galaxy would do when faced with the truth about their civilization. Yesterday, we learned something that changed everything, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation systems. We learned that the war we came to mediate is not what it appears to be. We learned that the galaxy is not what we thought it was. And we learned that we face a choice that will define humanity's future. She activated the holographic display system, showing the evidence of the conspiracy one more time. The financial records, the communication logs, the perpetual conflict protocol, the proof that the war was a carefully managed performance designed to maintain control over galactic civilization. This is not just about the Vorthan Empire and the Meridian Collective, Sarah continued. This is about a system of government that treats sapient beings as resources to be managed and consumed. A system that turns murder into policy and calls it stability. Around the hall, delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some looked ashamed, others defiant. Many simply resigned to the way things had always been. We have been offered a choice, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Join this system and become part of the conspiracy or face the consequences of refusing. The galaxy's leaders expect us to make the rational choice. They expect us to choose survival over principle. Ambassador Krell rose from his seat, his red eyes showing irritation. The human delegation has had time to consider the realities of galactic politics. What is your decision? Sarah looked at him, then at High Chancellor ZYX, then at the hundreds of delegates surrounding her. She thought about the billions of humans living on dozens of worlds, depending on her words for their future. She thought about the billions of aliens who had died in the fake war, never knowing that their deaths were meaningless. She thought about the principles that had guided humanity through its darkest hours on Earth. Our decision, she said clearly, is no. The hall erupted in shocked gasps and angry shouts. Delegates jumped to their feet, demanding explanations. Security guards moved toward the human delegation, uncertain of their orders. Humanity refuses to be part of your system, Sarah continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. We will not be complicit in murder. We will not pretend that genocide is policy. We will not sacrifice our principles for safety. You are making a grave mistake, ZYX said, her voice carrying the cold authority of ancient power. You cannot stand against the entire galaxy. You will be crushed. Maybe, Sarah replied, but we'll be crushed as free beings, not as slaves to your system. We'd rather die fighting for what's right than live supporting what's wrong. Marcus stepped forward to stand beside her. The human delegation is withdrawing from these negotiations. We cannot mediate a peace between parties who are secretly allied in a conspiracy of murder. Furthermore, Sarah added, we are releasing all evidence of this conspiracy to every news network and independent journalist in the galaxy. The people of every world deserve to know the truth about their leaders. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates from dozens of species rose to their feet, shouting threats and demands. Some called for the humans to be arrested. Others demanded that their ships be impounded. A few brave voices called for investigations into the conspiracy, but Sarah and Marcus were already walking toward the exit, their small security detail forming a protective circle around them. They had said what they came to say. They had made their choice clear. Now came the hard part. You cannot leave, Ambassador Krell shouted over the chaos. The Galactic Council has not dismissed this session. Sarah turned back to face him one last time. The Galactic Council has no authority over free beings. And as of today, humanity is no longer part of your system. As they reached the exit, Sarah could hear the assembly dissolving into chaos behind them. Some delegates were calling for military action against human worlds. Others were demanding investigations into their own governments. A few were quietly making plans to distance themselves from the conspiracy. The galaxy would never be the same. The carefully maintained system of control had been shattered by a species that was too young to understand that some truths were too dangerous to speak, too naive to accept that survival was more important than principle, too stubborn to bow to the wisdom of their elders as their ship prepared to leave the stellar convergence station. Sarah looked back at the massive structure one last time. Inside, the galaxy's leaders were probably planning their response to humanity's defiance. They would marshal their fleets, coordinate their attacks, and try to make an example of the species that had dared to challenge their authority. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had forgotten that humans were not alone in the galaxy. They had forgotten that every species contained individuals who dreamed of freedom, who yearned for justice, who were tired of living under the thumb of the powerful. The conspiracy had been exposed. The truth was spreading. And across the galaxy, beings who had never heard of humanity were beginning to ask dangerous questions about their own governments. The war was just beginning. But for the first time in galactic history, it would be a war fought for the right reasons. A war for truth, for justice, for the radical idea that sapient beings should be free to choose their own destiny. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy's corrupt system, but they had also lit a fire that would burn across the stars, illuminating the darkness that had hidden the truth for so long. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity as their ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying the news of their defiance back to Earth. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and terror. They had done the right thing. They had stood up for their principles. They had refused to compromise their values for safety. Now, they would discover whether humanity was strong enough to survive the consequences of their choice, whether their principles were worth the price they would have to pay, whether freedom was worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible. The answer would be written in the stars in the battles to come, in the courage of ordinary beings who refused to accept that things had to be the way they had always been. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy's peace talks, but they had also walked toward a future where peace might actually mean something, where justice might be more than a word, where freedom might be more than a dream. The real story was just beginning.